The moment Caleb rejected her beneath the blood moon, Aria felt something ancient inside her open its eyes. I, Caleb Thorne, heir to the Crescent Moon Pack, reject Aria Vale as my fated mate. His voice crashed through the ceremonial hall like an executioner's blade. Every conversation stopped. Every breath caught. Then the laughter began. It spread through the gathered packs in cruel, delighted waves, rising beneath the vaulted ceiling of the Moonstone Hall until the sound became almost physical. A pressure against Aria's skin. 1,000 invisible hands shoving her lower. Above the open roof, the blood moon hung enormous over Crescent Valley. Crimson light poured across the black stone altar. It stained the white ceremonial banners red. It gleamed on silver goblets, jeweled throat chains, sharpened claws, and the hungry eyes of the elite werewolves who had traveled from neighboring territories to witness Caleb's ascension. They had expected a coronation. Instead, they had been given a public sacrifice. Aria stood at the foot of the altar in a coarse gray servant dress. The fabric hung shapelessly from her slender body. Its hem was stained with ash from the kitchens. One sleeve had been mended so many times that the original cloth was barely visible beneath the uneven stitches. Her dark hair had been dragged into a loose braid that morning by one of the house servants. Several strands had escaped and clung to her pale face. Even covered in rags, she was impossible to make ordinary. Her beauty survived neglect. It survived hunger. It survived years of sleeping in unheated rooms and working until her fingers split. High cheekbones gave her face an elegant, almost aristocratic structure. Her lips were full despite the faint cut at one corner. Beneath lowered lashes, her eyes were a startling shade of blue-gray, like winter skies before a storm. But no one in the hall praised her beauty. They saw only what Caleb had taught them to see. Wolfless. Worthless. A servant who had committed the unforgivable offense of being chosen by fate for a future alpha. Caleb stood several steps above her. He wore a black ceremonial coat embroidered with threads of dark red. The golden insignia of the Crescent Moon Pack rested over his heart. His blonde hair had been carefully swept back, and pride sharpened every line of his handsome face. At 22, he had the body of a trained warrior and the expression of a boy who had never been denied anything. His hand rested possessively around the waist of the woman beside him. Celine Vale, Aria's stepsister. Celine wore the silver gown that had once belonged to Aria's mother. The sight of it cut deeper than Caleb's rejection. Its fitted bodice shimmered with hundreds of tiny moon crystals. Its long train spilled down the altar steps like frozen water. Celine's honey-blonde curls had been twisted beneath a jeweled circlet, and her lips curved with the soft, victorious smile of someone who had spent years poisoning a well and had finally watched her enemy drink. Caleb pulled her closer. "My future Luna," he announced. More applause erupted. Celine lowered her lashes with practiced modesty. Then she looked directly at Aria. The triumph in her eyes was naked. Aria remembered that same expression from childhood. It had appeared when Celine tore the pages from Aria's mother's journals, when she slipped silver dust into Aria's food and then watched her become sick, when she whispered into Caleb's ear that Aria's lack of a wolf spirit would contaminate his bloodline. Celine had always known how to wound without leaving marks. Caleb lifted his chin. "The moon goddess may have placed a false bond between Aria and me," he said, addressing the crowd. "But no goddess will command the future alpha of Crescent Valley to take a defective female as his Luna." The laughter sharpened. An older warrior near the altar grinned openly. "Can she even hear the pack link?" "No," another answered. "She's little better than human." "Worse," Celine said sweetly. "Humans are at least useful when properly trained." The hall exploded again. Aria did not move. She did not lower her head. She did not give them the tears they had gathered to see. That refusal irritated Caleb more than any scream could have. His smile thinned. "Look at me when I reject you." Aria raised her eyes. For one fleeting second, Caleb's expression faltered. He had forgotten how beautiful she was when she looked directly at him. There was no pleading in her gaze, no desperation, only a quiet, cold endurance that made his public victory feel strangely incomplete. Caleb's wolf stirred beneath his skin. It did not celebrate. It snarled. The animal had been restless since Aria entered the hall. It clawed at his ribs. It flooded his mind with confusion and rage, demanding that he descend from the altar, tear Selene away, and drag Aria against his chest. Caleb crushed the instinct. A wolf was a beast. He was the future alpha. He would not be ruled by primitive hunger, especially not for her. "You heard me," he said. "Accept the rejection." A terrible pain twisted through Aria's chest. The mate bond stretched between them like a burning wire. With every heartbeat, it tightened. She could feel it breaking piece by piece. Not cleanly. Never cleanly. The bond tore through memory first. The afternoon Caleb had found her near the river when they were children, and handed her his coat. The winter he had sworn he would protect her from the pack boys who called her a curse. The night of his 18th birthday, when their scents changed, and both of them froze beneath the pine trees, realizing fate had bound them together. He had kissed her forehead then. "My mate," he had whispered with awe. 4 years later, he stood beneath the blood moon with his arm around her stepsister and looked at Aria as though touching her had been a humiliation. The bond ripped again. Pain detonated behind her ribs. Her knees weakened. Still, she remained standing. Selene noticed. Her smile vanished. "Perhaps she doesn't understand," she said. "Wolfless creatures can be painfully slow." Caleb descended one step. "I kept it, Aria." Her mouth tasted of iron. She swallowed. The entire hall waited. Aria could have begged. She could have reminded him of every promise he had made. She could have exposed Selene's lies, Caleb's secret visits to the servant wing, the nights he had pressed Aria against the pantry door, and told her that destiny mattered more than rank. She could have destroyed his dignity before the same crowd that now devoured hers. But she understood something with sudden, brutal clarity. A man who needed an audience to reject her had never been strong enough to deserve her. Aria straightened. The movement was small, yet the air near the altar seemed to shift. "I accept your rejection." Her voice was quiet. It carried to every corner of the hall. The bond snapped. Agony tore through her. Aria's vision went white. Her body swayed. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as the invisible connection between them shattered. Caleb jerked as though struck in the chest. His hand flew to his heart. For an instant, pure panic twisted his face. Then Selene clutched his arm. Caleb forced himself to laugh. "There," he said. "It is finished." Aria breathed through the pain. Once. Twice. She locked her knees and refused to fall. A red stain slowly spread across the front of her gray dress, where her fingernails had pierced her palms. Selene stepped forward. "Not quite finished." She turned toward Elder Morvain, who stood beside the ceremonial brazier. The elder was a thin man with silver hair and a mouth like a knife wound. He had served Caleb's father for decades and had perfected the art of disguising cruelty as tradition. He reached into the folds of his robe. When his hand emerged, he held a black iron collar. A symbol had been carved into its center. A broken crescent. The slave mark. Unease moved through several members of the crowd. Public rejection was cruel, but legal. Enslaving a rejected mate was something darker, older, a punishment rarely invoked outside the most vicious packs. Aria stared at the collar. For the first time that night, fear touched her. Not for the pain. She had survived pain. The mark would strip away her legal identity. It would bind her to the Crescent Moon bloodline as property. She would no longer be permitted to leave the territory, refuse an order, inherit land, or speak before the council. Caleb would not merely cast her aside. He would own her. Selene leaned close enough for Aria to smell the sweet floral oil in her hair. "You didn't truly believe we would let you walk away, did you?" she whispered. Aria looked at Caleb. He avoided her eyes. Coward. The word moved silently through her mind. Not alpha, not leader. Coward. Elder Morvain raised the collar. Aria Vale has lived beneath Crescent protection despite possessing no wolf, no rank, and no value to the bloodline. By authority of the future Alpha, she will remain in service to the pack for the rest of her natural life. On your knees, Caleb ordered. Aria did not move. His jaw tightened. I said kneel. No. The word struck the hall harder than a shout. Several warriors straightened. Celine's face twisted before she smoothed it into a smile. Caleb descended the remaining altar steps. He stopped directly in front of Aria. Up close, she could see the pulse hammering in his throat. You are making this worse for yourself. You already did the worst thing you were capable of. His face flushed. The crowd murmured. Aria saw the exact moment his humiliation became rage. Caleb raised his hand. For 1 second, she thought he would strike her himself. Instead, he looked toward the guards. Put her down. 2 pack enforcers seized Aria's arms. She fought. Not wildly, not uselessly. She drove her heel into one guard's knee and twisted hard enough to tear free of his grip. He cursed. The second guard caught her around the waist. A third rushed forward. Together, they threw her down. Aria hit the stone floor on one knee. Pain shot up her thigh. Before she could rise, a boot slammed between her shoulder blades. She crashed forward. Her cheek struck the dirt scattered across the ceremonial floor. The impact split her lower lip. Warm blood filled her mouth. The hall erupted in cheers. Aria lay still for half a heartbeat. Then she placed both palms against the ground. Her arms trembled. She pushed herself up. The boot pressed harder. Her elbows buckled. Laughter rang above her. Look at her. The future Luna's sister. Not anymore. Bran the Stray. Aria tasted blood and dust. She focused on the cold stone beneath her fingers, on the beat of her own heart, on the voice of her mother, almost forgotten after 12 years. Never let cruel people decide what you are. Her mother had whispered those words while dying. Aria had been 8 years old, too young to understand, old enough to remember. She lifted her head. Blood traced a thin line from her lip to her chin. Her braid had come loose. Dark hair spilled across her face, framing eyes that held no tears. The crowd's amusement dimmed. There was something unnerving about a woman who would not break. Celine saw it too. Hold her still, she snapped. Caleb took the iron collar from Elder Morvain. The black metal looked small in his hands. Harmless. It was neither. Symbols along its inner rim glowed with dull red light as he approached. The scent of heated iron spread through the hall. Aria's breath shortened. The slave mark reacted to blood. Once pressed against the neck, it would burn through skin, magic, and bone. The brand would become part of her essence. Caleb crouched beside her. This could have been different, he muttered. Aria turned her face toward him. You could have been different. His eyes hardened. He gripped the back of her neck. The touch made his wolf roar inside him. Mine. The force of it nearly drove Caleb backward. He ignored the animal. He lifted the brand. The red symbol brightened. Heat rolled over Aria's skin before the metal touched her. Something inside her recoiled, not in fear, in fury. The iron descended. 1 inch. Half an inch. The moment the slave mark grazed the blood on Aria's neck, the world stopped. Every candle in the Moonstone Hall went out. The ceremonial flames vanished. Darkness swallowed the crowd. Someone screamed. Caleb froze. The brand in his hand began to shake. Aria heard a sound beneath the silence, a heartbeat. Not hers. Something deeper, older. It thundered beneath Crescent Valley. Once. The floor trembled. Twice. Dust fell from the ceiling. 3 times. The entire mountain groaned. Then Aria's blood boiled. Her back arched. A scream tore from her throat, but it did not sound entirely human. Heat erupted through her veins. Not the heat of fire, the heat of awakening flesh, of sealed power breaking through ancient chains, of a creature buried beneath generations of silence suddenly remembering its name. Silver light raced beneath Aria's skin. It flashed through the veins in her hands, climbed her arms, spread across her throat beneath Caleb's fingers. He released her with a cry. The slave brand burned white hot. Caleb hurled it aside. It struck the floor and shattered. Iron did not shatter. Yet the collar exploded into black fragments that skidded across the stone like broken glass. The guards holding Aria were thrown backward. Their bodies flew through the air and smashed into the altar steps. A wave of pressure burst from her. It was invisible. It was unstoppable. Every banner snapped at once. The silver goblets overturned. The windows cracked. Warriors staggered as their wolves recoiled inside them, whining and clawing for submission. Elder Morvain dropped to one knee. "What is this?" he gasped. Aria rose, slowly. Her torn gray dress moved around her ankles, though there was no wind. Her blood lifted from the floor in tiny crimson droplets. Each drop hovered around her body, trembling in the charged air. Caleb stared at her. For the first time in his life, he looked at Aria and felt terror. Not disgust, not embarrassment, terror. Her hair floated around her face. The wound on her lip began to close. The bruises along her arms faded beneath the spreading silver glow. Aria's eyes opened. They were no longer blue-gray. They burned with a pale, glacial light. Celine stumbled backward. "No," she whispered. Aria heard her. She heard everything. The pounding hearts in the hall. The frightened breaths. The whimpers of wolves trapped beneath human skin. Beyond the stone walls, she heard the forests of Crescent Valley bending beneath a rising wind. She heard distant pack members waking in their beds. She heard ancient stones buried beneath the mountains cracking open. And somewhere beyond the edge of the territory, very far away, something powerful answered her. A roar rolled across the horizon. Low, male, terrible. The sound did not enter the hall through the doors. It entered through the bones of every wolf present. The crowd collapsed into silence. Caleb looked up at the open roof. The crimson blood moon flickered. Darkness moved across its surface. Then the red light fractured. A silver line split the moon from top to bottom. The blood moon changed, not slowly, not naturally. In a single violent pulse, the crimson sphere became blinding silver. Light exploded over Crescent Valley. A shockwave crashed through the Moonstone Hall, forcing warriors to their knees and ripping the ceremonial banners from the walls. The earth shook. Glass shattered. Wolves howled in terror across the mountains. And Aria stood at the center of it all, blood on her lips, silver fire beneath her skin, while the entire mocking crowd finally understood that they had not branded a slave. They had awakened a queen. They had awakened a queen. The realization moved through the Moonstone Hall like poison slipping into a vein. No one spoke. No one dared. Silver light poured through the shattered roof and washed the great hall clean of crimson. It turned the black stone walls pale. It gleamed across overturned goblets, broken glass, and the fragments of the slave collar scattered across the floor. Every jagged piece of iron continued to smoke. Aria stood at the center of the devastation, her breath coming slowly now. The terrible heat beneath her skin had not vanished. It had changed. It no longer burned without direction. It waited, coiled, listening. The blood hovering around her descended in small red drops, staining the dirt at her bare feet. The silver glow beneath her veins dimmed, but it did not disappear. It pulsed in time with the strange second heartbeat she could still feel beneath the valley. Once. Twice. A rhythm older than the keep. Older than Crescent Moon Law. Perhaps older than the packs themselves. Around her, the elite wolves remained frozen. Some were still on their knees from the force of the lunar shockwave. Others clung to pillars or overturned tables, their faces stripped of every trace of amusement. Celine stood near the altar with both hands gripping the ceremonial railing. Her perfect curls had come loose. Her circlet sat crooked. The silver gown she had stolen from Aria's mother no longer made her look regal. Under the transformed moon, its crystals reflected a harsh, ghostly light that exposed the sweat shining along her forehead. "What did she do?" Celine whispered. No one answered. Caleb had fallen against the altar steps. He pushed himself upright, one hand pressed to his ribs, staring at Aria as though she had become an unfamiliar creature. His wolf had gone silent. That terrified him more than the earthquake. The beast that had raged against the rejection now crouched somewhere deep inside his mind, flattened in submission to a power it recognized, even if Caleb did not. He forced himself to stand. "This is a trick," his voice cracked. Elder Morvayn looked toward him in disbelief. "My alpha heir? A trick!" Caleb repeated more loudly. "Some forbidden spell. She must have planned this." Aria turned her head. The smallest movement made Caleb stop speaking. He had ordered her beaten, thrown her into the dirt, attempted to brand her as property. Yet only now, under the silver moon, did he truly see her. She was still dressed in rags. Blood still marked her mouth. Dirt still clung to her cheek. But the humiliation had fallen away from her. The servant dress no longer diminished her. It made the strength in her body more striking. The torn fabric revealed the elegant line of one shoulder. Dark hair framed her luminous face in wild waves. Her pale eyes held no confusion now. They held judgment. Caleb's pulse stumbled. For one irrational moment, he wanted to cross the hall and reach for her. He wanted to tell the crowd that the rejection had been ceremonial, that the collar had been a misunderstanding, that she still belonged beside him. Then he saw Selene watching. He saw the elders. He saw the visiting alphas who had come to measure his strength. Pride closed around his throat. Caleb lifted his chin. "Seize her." No one moved. The guards who had held Aria moments earlier remained sprawled against the altar. One had managed to roll onto his side. He looked toward her, then immediately lowered his eyes. Caleb's face reddened. "I gave an order." The nearest enforcer trembled. His wolf would not allow him to obey. Aria did not know how she understood that. She simply did. The minds of the wolves around her were not open. Exactly. Their emotions pressed against her awareness like heat through a wall. Fear, submission, confusion, and beneath it all, a primitive recognition. Something in them knew what she was. Something in her did not. "Aria." Selene's voice was softer now. "Careful." She descended one step from the altar and forced a concerned expression onto her face. "You must be frightened." Aria looked at her. Selene stopped. "I know tonight has been overwhelming," she continued. "Caleb's rejection must have caused some kind of unstable reaction. But we are still family." Family. The word almost made Aria laugh. Selene took another step. "We can help you. You tried to enslave me." Selene's lips parted. "That was the elder's decision." Elder Morvayn jerked his head toward her. Selene ignored him. "I never wanted you harmed." The lie entered the hall and died there. Aria could feel its shape. She could feel Selene's terror beneath the sweetness, her jealousy, her frantic calculation. Caleb moved to his future Luna's side. "Do not speak to her as though she has authority here." The floor beneath him shuddered. Caleb flinched. Aria did not. A low vibration moved through the iron doors at the far end of the hall. Everyone turned. The doors were enormous, forged from black mountain iron and reinforced with silverwood beams. Each stood more than 20 feet tall. Ancient pact symbols had been hammered into their surfaces, along with defensive wards designed to withstand armies. The doors trembled again. A thin stream of dust fell from the archway above them. Elder Morvayn's face lost what little color remained. "The outer guards," he whispered. Why have they not sounded the alarm? As though in answer, something heavy struck the other side of the doors. Not a fist, not a weapon, a pressure. The iron groaned. Every engraved ward ignited at once, flaring red across the doors. For half a second, the defensive magic blazed. Then every symbol went black. A deep crack split the center of the iron. The sound was so loud that several wolves covered their ears. Caleb staggered backward. What is happening? The crack widened. Metal peeled away from the center without being touched. Reinforced beams snapped. Bolts the size of a man's forearm tore from the walls and floated in the air. A devastating force gathered beyond the entrance. Aria felt it before the others did. Cold, violent, infinite. The power surrounding her was ancient moonlight. The power approaching the hall was something else. It was night without stars, a winter battlefield, the final heartbeat of a defeated king. Every wolf in the room reacted. Bones shifted beneath skin. Eyes flashed amber. Claws emerged involuntarily. Then the invisible force struck. The massive iron doors did not open. They vanished. Metal, timber, stone, and ancient enchantments exploded into a cloud of black dust. No fragments flew inward. There was no debris. The doors were pulverized so completely that they became a rolling wall of ash, swept through the hall by a freezing wind. Candles toppled. Loose fabric snapped. The remaining windows blew outward. The crowd screamed. Through the cloud of iron dust, a line of dark figures appeared. They moved without haste. That made them more terrifying. The first men to enter wore fitted black combat armor beneath long coats. Their faces were expressionless. Each carried a sheathed blade at his back, though none reached for a weapon. They did not need to. Death followed them like a scent. 2 moved left. 2 moved right. A silent formation. A living wall. Then the figure behind them stepped through the ruined entrance. Kaelen entered the Moonstone Hall. He was taller than any man Aria had ever seen. Not merely tall. Monumental. His shoulders filled the dark royal trench coat he wore, the heavy fabric shaped around a body built with brutal, impossible strength. The coat fell to his calves, shifting behind him with each measured step. Beneath it, a black shirt stretched across a massive chest and sharply defined abdomen. His hands were bare, large, scarred across the knuckles. A dark metal ring encircled one thumb, engraved with markings Aria could not read. His face was ruggedly handsome in a way that felt dangerous rather than polished. A hard jaw, high cheekbones, a straight nose that looked as though it had been broken once and healed without permission. His dark hair had been swept back carelessly, with one thick strand fallen across his forehead. But it was his eyes that stopped the room. They were nearly black, not empty, endless. The eyes of something that had watched dynasties rise and collapse, and had found both equally unimpressive. He looked neither young nor old. He looked permanent. The air changed around him. Pressure descended. It slammed into every wolf in the hall. The effect was immediate. Elder Morvain collapsed first. His knees struck the floor hard enough to crack bone. He cried out and caught himself with both hands. The visiting alphas followed. Powerful men who ruled hundreds of wolves folded under the force of Kaelen's presence. Some fell to one knee. Others dropped completely, palms pressed to the dirt, their bodies reacting before their minds understood. A woman near the back shifted halfway into her wolf form from sheer terror, then curled against the floor with a whine. Celine clutched the railing. Her knees buckled. She fought to remain upright. Kaelen took one more step. Celine collapsed. The stolen circlet fell from her hair and rang against the stone. Caleb gripped the altar, his face contorting as he resisted. His legs shook violently. Sweat rolled down his temples. He had experienced alpha pressure before. His father had used it during training. Visiting leaders had tested him with it. This was not alpha pressure. This was biological annihilation. Every cell in Caleb's body understood that the creature entering the hall stood above him in the natural order. His wolf buried itself so deeply inside his mind that Caleb could barely feel it. The urge to expose his throat became unbearable. He bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. He remained standing, barely. Kaelen's guards spread across the entrance, 6 in total. None looked at the crowd. None acknowledged the kneeling alphas. Their attention remained fixed on possible threats, though the idea that anyone in the hall could threaten the man behind them seemed absurd. Kaelen continued forward. His boots crossed the dust that had once been the iron doors. Each step echoed, slow, heavy, final. A visiting elder whispered, "Supreme One." The words shivered through the silence. Others understood. Faces went pale, heads lowered further. The supreme Lycan King. The ruler whispered about in territories that had never seen him. The tyrant whose armies had ended the Hollow Fang rebellion in one night. The monarch who had not attended a pack ascension in more than a century. The beast no council summoned. The king no alpha commanded. Kaelen. Caleb heard the title pass through the crowd and felt a surge of wild relief beneath his fear. Of course. The transformed moon, the arrival of the Supreme King. It had to be connected to the ascension. His ascension. The timing could not be coincidence. Kaelen had come to recognize him, to elevate him before every rival pack in Crescent Valley. Caleb's terror twisted into ambition. He dragged himself upright, using the altar railing. Salen reached for his ankle. "Don't!" she breathed. He kicked her hand away. Caleb straightened his ceremonial coat and forced his lips into a smile. It was too wide, too eager, sickening in its desperation. He stepped down from the altar. The pressure increased. His knees nearly failed. Still, he walked forward. Every face in the hall turned toward him in disbelief. Kaelen did not look at Caleb. His gaze remained fixed beyond him. Caleb mistook the silence for permission. "Your Majesty." Kaelen continued walking. Caleb moved into his path. "I am Caleb Thorne, heir to the Crescent Moon Pack." No response. Caleb's smile strained. "We are deeply honored that you have chosen this night to witness my ascension." One of Kaelen's guards turned his head. He was a broad man with close-cropped dark hair and a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His expression did not change. Caleb continued. "As you can see, the ceremony has experienced a minor disruption. A defective servant triggered some unstable magic, but the situation is under control." The guard vanished. That was how it appeared. One moment he stood near the entrance, the next he was directly beside Caleb. His arm moved once. The backhand landed with a sound like splitting timber. Caleb flew across the hall. His body struck a stone pillar 10 feet away. The impact cracked the pillar and drove the air from his lungs. He fell onto his side, coughing violently. Blood poured from his mouth. Several teeth struck the floor. Celine screamed his name. The guard returned to formation without looking at him again. Kaelen had never broken stride. He passed the place where Caleb had been standing. He passed the kneeling elders. He passed the altar prepared for an alpha heir. He did not acknowledge Celine in her stolen gown. He ignored every title, every rank, every bowed head. His eyes remained on Aria. She felt the force of his attention before he reached her. It was not like Caleb's stare. Caleb had always looked at her through layers of expectation. Mate. Burden. Embarrassment. Possession. Kaelen looked at her as though the rest of the world had ceased to exist. Aria's strange new power stirred. The silver light beneath her skin brightened. Kaelen's eyes darkened in response. For one sharp second, the air between them seemed to catch fire without heat. He stopped several feet away. Aria remained near the shattered slave collar. Her strength had begun to fade. The awakening had taken something from her body. Her legs trembled. The pain of the rejected bond returned in dull waves beneath her ribs. She tried to stand taller. The room tilted. Her knee touched the dirt. A murmur passed through the crowd. Kaelen's expression changed, only slightly, but every guard at the entrance tensed. A lethal cold swept across the hall. His gaze dropped to the blood at Aria's mouth, then to the bruises around her arms, then to the boot mark on the back of her dress. The stone beneath his feet cracked, not from his weight, from rage. Caleb coughed and tried to rise. "She is nothing," he rasped. "A wolfless servant." Kaelen did not turn. The pressure in the hall sharpened. Caleb collapsed again, choking on his own breath. Aria watched the stranger approach. Every instinct told her to fear him. The wolves in the room feared him. The elders trembled before him. Even the stones seemed afraid to resist his steps. Yet the ancient presence inside her did not retreat. It reached toward him, recognized him. A word moved through Aria's mind in a voice that was not entirely her own. Mine. She inhaled sharply. Kaelen stopped directly before her. For the first time since entering the hall, the supreme Lycan King lowered his gaze, not in contempt, not in assessment, in reverence. The terrifying pressure surrounding him withdrew from Aria alone. Warmth replaced it. A profound stillness settled around her body, shielding her from the fear suffocating everyone else. Kaelen looked down at her bleeding hand. Aria had not realized her palm was still cut from her nails. He removed one black glove from inside his coat, though he had not been wearing it. He spread the fine fabric over the dirt in front of her. Then the ruler before whom entire packs crawled lowered himself. One knee touched the ground. The hall stopped breathing. Elder Morvain lifted his head, his mouth hanging open. Celine stared as if she had gone mad. Caleb froze with blood dripping from his chin. Kaelen knelt in the dust at Aria's feet. His towering body bowed before hers. He reached for her hand, but did not seize it. He waited. The gesture was so unexpected that Aria could only stare. Those dark, ancient eyes held hers. There was brutality inside them. War. Obsession. A capacity for violence vast enough to swallow kingdoms. But none of it was directed at her. For her, there was only devotion. Aria slowly placed her bleeding hand in his. Kaelen's fingers closed around it with impossible gentleness. He lifted her knuckles to his mouth. His lips touched her skin. A shock traveled through Aria's body. Silver light erupted beneath her veins. Dark power rolled outward from Kaelen in answer. The two forces collided above them, twisting together like moonlight and shadow. The entire keep groaned. Kaelen closed his eyes for one brief moment, as though the taste of her blood had ended an ancient suffering no one else could understand. Then he raised his head. His voice was deep, gravelly. It carried through the silent hall and into every corner of Crescent Valley. "My queen! My queen!" The words did not fade. They settled into the bones of the keep, into the cracked pillars, into the blood-soaked dirt beneath Aria's knees, into the terrified hearts of every wolf who had mocked her. Kaelen remained bowed for one breath longer, his lips resting against her wounded knuckles, as though the blood there were sacred. Then he rose. The movement was slow, controlled. Yet the instant he reached his full, towering height, the atmosphere changed again. The reverence disappeared from his face. Lethal fury replaced it. His dark eyes moved over Aria's torn dress. The bruise forming across her shoulder. The blood on her mouth. The dirt ground into her palms. Each injury sharpened something in him. The stone beneath his boots split with a dry crack. Aria felt the rage rolling from him in dense, violent waves. It did not touch her. It curved around her body, shielding her even as it crushed the air from everyone else. Kaelen turned his head. His gaze found the parchment lying near the shattered iron collar, the slave contract. Elder Morvain's signature darkened the bottom of the page. Caleb's mark had been pressed beside it in fresh red wax. Aria's name had already been written into the binding clause, property of the Crescent Moon bloodline, for the duration of her natural life. Kaelen stared at it. The silence became unbearable. Elder Morvain began to shake. "Supreme One," he whispered, still kneeling. "The document is merely an ancient pact provision. It was never intended to insult your authority." Kaelen did not look at him. "Your authority?" Morvain corrected desperately. "Her authority? I meant no insult to her authority." Kaelen lifted one hand. He did not touch the parchment. He did not speak. The slave contract rose from the floor. It hung in the air between them, trembling. The red wax began to melt. Then the parchment tore itself apart, not into strips, into threads. Thousands of pale fibers unraveled in a violent spiral, twisting tighter and tighter until the contract became a thin line of dust. Kaelen closed his fingers. The dust vanished. No ash remained. No fragment. Even the magical signature binding the document disappeared from the air, as though it had never existed. Elder Morvain released a choked sound. Kaelen finally looked at him. "You attempted to reduce her to property." His voice was quiet. That made it worse. Morvayn pressed his forehead to the ground. We did not know what she was. Kaelin's eyes turned blacker. And if she had been powerless? The elder stopped breathing. Kaelen took one step toward him. Would that have made your cruelty lawful? Morvayn opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Aria watched him tremble. For years, the elders had hidden behind ceremony, behind rules written by dead men, behind words like order, tradition, purity, and duty. They had made brutality sound civilized. Kaelen stripped all of that away with one question. Would it have been acceptable if she had truly been weak? No one in the hall answered. They did not need to. Their silence confessed everything. Kaelen turned back to Aria. The fury in his face softened, but only for her. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to her height. The power inside you is awake, he said. His voice remained deep, but the edge had changed. It no longer crushed the room. It wrapped around her like a dark cloak. Aria looked down at her glowing hands. I don't understand it. You were never meant to understand it alone. A strange ache moved through her chest. Not the torn mate bond. Something else. Something warmer. Kaelen lifted his hand toward her face and stopped before touching her. Permission. Again, he waited. Aria gave the smallest nod. His thumb brushed the blood from the corner of her mouth. The contact sent a pulse of silver light through her body. Kaelen inhaled. His expression tightened as though restraining something immense. Your bloodline was sealed, he said, layered beneath poison, silver, and suppression magic. Celine's head jerked up. Aria saw it. So did Kaelen. His gaze shifted toward her stepsister. Celine immediately lowered her face. Aria's mind filled with old memories. The bitter tea Celine brought every winter morning, the powder mixed into her food, the herbs that made her feverish, the sudden weakness that followed every full moon. Aria had believed she was sickly, wolfless, defective. She looked at Celine. You knew. Celine began shaking her head. No, the lie sounded thin. You knew something was inside me. No, Aria. I swear. Kaelin's pressure tightened around her. Celine cried out and flattened herself against the floor. Aria could feel her terror now. It poured from the woman in waves, mixed with jealousy so old it had hardened into hatred. Celine had not known everything, but she had known enough. She had known the herbs kept Aria weak. She had known their mother's silver journals contained references to a hidden bloodline. She had known Aria's wolf had not failed to appear. It had been imprisoned. Kaelen looked back at Aria. The seal is ancient. It was strengthened for years. Can it be broken? His eyes held hers. Yes. The answer was immediate. Certain. But not gently. Aria looked at the blood still glowing beneath her skin. Nothing about tonight has been gentle. Something dark and proud flashed in Kaelin's face. No. He rose and removed the heavy trench coat from his shoulders. One of his guards stepped forward to take it. Without the coat, Kaelen seemed even larger. His black shirt fitted tightly over a massive chest, and powerful arms marked by old scars. Some were pale. Others carried the faint shimmer of magical wounds. The body beneath the fabric did not look sculpted for beauty. It looked forged for war. He pushed back one sleeve. Aria saw lines of black ink encircling his forearm. Ancient symbols ran beneath his skin, shifting faintly as if alive. Kaelen raised his wrist to his mouth. Then he bit down. His fangs pierced flesh. Dark blood welled instantly. It was not red, not entirely. Black shimmered at its center, ringed with silver light. The scent filled the hall. Every wolf reacted. A collective moan moved through the crowd. Pure Lycan blood. The oldest blood in their world, the source from which weaker wolf lineages had descended. Even a single drop could heal wounds, strengthen a pack bond, or drive an ordinary wolf mad with power. Kaelen let it flow freely. No one dared move toward him. He stepped closer to Aria and held his bleeding wrist between them. This will break the seal! Aria stared at the blood. What will it do to me? It will reveal what was stolen from you." "That isn't what I asked." Kaelen's expression shifted. For the first time, someone in the hall had challenged him directly. One of his guards glanced toward them. Kaelen did not appear offended. He appeared interested. "It will hurt," he said. "Your body will fight the seal as it breaks. Every lie placed inside your blood will be burned out. Could it kill me?" "No." His answer carried absolute conviction. Aria studied him. "How can you be certain?" Kaelen lowered his wrist slightly. "Because I would tear death apart before allowing it to keep you." The hall went still. He did not say it as poetry. He said it as fact. A promise from a creature powerful enough to attempt it. Aria looked at the man who had entered through iron dust, brought alphas to their knees, and knelt before a servant in the dirt. Then she looked at Caleb. He was half upright against the cracked pillar, blood coating his mouth. His expression twisted between jealousy, fear, and disbelief. He had been given years to protect her. He had used them to diminish her. Kaelen had been given moments. He had already destroyed her chains. Aria turned back. "Do it?" Kaelen's eyes burned. He slid one hand behind her neck. Even that touch was careful. His other wrist pressed against her lips. "Drink." The first drop touched her tongue. Power exploded through her. Aria's body arched. Kaelen caught her before she fell. His blood was fire, shadow. Moonlight sharpened into a blade. It raced down her throat and entered her veins with violent purpose. Every hidden thread of suppression magic reacted at once. Pain tore through her spine. Aria screamed. The sound shattered the remaining glass in the hall. Silver lines erupted across her skin. They spread from her throat, branching down her arms and across her chest like lightning trapped beneath flesh. Inside her, something broke. Then another seal fractured, and another. Memories that were not hers flashed through her mind. A woman with silver-white hair standing on a frozen battlefield. A crown carved from moonstone. White wolves running beneath a starless sky. A child wrapped in black silk. Blood on palace stairs. A desperate voice whispering, "Hide her." Aria gasped against Kaelen's wrist. He held her upright. "More." She drank. The hall disappeared. Her body became a war zone. Dark chains wrapped around something enormous inside her. Kaelen's blood struck those chains like molten iron. One after another, they shattered. A roar erupted inside Aria's soul. Female. Ancient. Furious. The force of it threw every wolf in the hall flat against the ground. Kaelen remained standing. His arm tightened around Aria. "Yes," he growled. "Rise." The word reached the creature inside her. The final seal broke. Silver light detonated. It swallowed Aria completely. Kaelen released her and stepped back as the power surged upward in a blinding pillar. It tore through the open roof and struck the silver moon. The entire keep trembled. Aria rose from the ground. Her feet left the dirt. The gray servant dress ripped apart along every seam, but the silver light wrapped around her body before the ruined fabric could fall. It moved like liquid moonlight, flowing over her skin in luminous waves. The bruises vanished, the cuts closed. Every mark placed on her by years of labor and cruelty dissolved. Her dark hair lifted around her face, color drained through each strand from root to tip. Black became frost. Frost became silver. Then the silver brightened until her hair fell past her waist, in a shimmering cascade of white light. Her face changed without becoming unfamiliar. The beauty hidden beneath exhaustion sharpened into something breathtaking. Her cheekbones appeared more elegant. Her pale skin glowed with cold radiance. Her lips deepened into a soft, dangerous red. Aria opened her eyes. They burned ice blue, not the blue of sky, the blue at the heart of a glacier. The light surrounding her collapsed inward. Her feet touched the floor. The servant rags were gone. In their place, silver energy formed a fitted gown around her body. The fabric looked woven from moonlight and winter mist. It traced her slender waist, flowed over her hips, and fell in a long, luminous train behind her. Silver heels formed beneath her feet. A delicate pattern of white branches appeared across the bodice, framing her collarbones like frost on glass. Above her forehead, light twisted into a narrow spectral crown. The transformation ended. Silence followed. Aria stood before them as the last White Wolf Queen. The title entered every wolf's mind at once. Not spoken. Remembered. Ancient instinct took control. The crowd began to weep. Visiting alphas pressed their faces to the floor. Warriors who had laughed at her moments earlier shook so violently their armor rattled. Elder Morvain sobbed openly, blood leaking from his nose as he struggled to breathe beneath her aura. Aria had not consciously released it. It simply radiated from her. Supreme, cold, crushing. Her presence was not an imitation of alpha dominance. It was the source of it. Kaelen stood beside her, immune to the force, his dark power curling around her silver aura in perfect balance. Caleb tried to speak. Aria. The moment he said her name, her eyes moved toward him. Pressure slammed into his body. His elbows collapsed. His face struck the dirt. Blood poured from his nose. He tried to rise again, but his arms buckled beneath him. Stop! He gasped. Celine crawled toward Aria. Her silver gown dragged through the dirt. The stolen circlet was gone. Blood ran from both nostrils, smearing across her lips. Please! Aria looked down at her. Celine raised trembling hands. I'm your sister. No! The single word cracked through the hall. Celine began to cry. Real tears this time. Not performance. Not manipulation. Terror. I made mistakes. You poisoned me. I didn't know what the herbs would do. You knew they caused pain. Celine sobbed harder. Caleb made me jealous. Caleb turned his bloodied face toward her. What? Celine ignored him. I was afraid he would choose you. I was afraid everyone would choose you. Aria felt no satisfaction, only clarity. Celine had built her entire life around stealing what belonged to someone else. A mother's gown, a father's attention, a mate, a title. She had mistaken possession for worth. Aria walked toward her. Her heels clicked against the stone. Once. Celine flinched. Twice. Caleb tried to crawl backward. 3 times. The elders lowered their faces. Each step sounded like judgment approaching. Aria stopped in front of Celine. Pinned to the upper edge of the stolen gown was a golden badge shaped like a crescent moon. The future Luna's Alpha badge. Celine had worn it proudly throughout the ceremony. Aria reached down. Celine recoiled. Please don't hurt me. Aria caught the badge between 2 fingers. I have no need to hurt you. She ripped it from the dress. Fabric tore. Celine gasped. Aria examined the golden insignia. Once, it had represented everything she believed she had lost. A place in the pack. A future beside her mate. The right to stand at the altar instead of serving beneath it. Now it looked small. Cheap. She dropped it. The badge struck the floor between them. Aria placed one silver heel over it. Caleb stared. Celine stopped crying. Aria pressed down. The metal cracked. With a slow twist of her foot, she crushed the Alpha badge into a flattened, broken shape. The sound echoed through the hall. Caleb's face tightened as though she had crushed something inside him. Perhaps she had. Aria looked at Celine. Her ice-blue eyes held no rage. Indifference was colder. You wanted my place, she said. You wanted my mate. You poisoned me, dressed yourself in my mother's gown, and humiliated yourself for a title that was never yours. Celine's lips trembled. Aria glanced toward Caleb. He lay bleeding in the dirt where she had been forced to kneel. For the first time, he looked at her with desperate hunger. Aria? He whispered. The rejection can be reversed. Kaelen's head turned. The temperature in the hall plummeted. Caleb immediately lowered his eyes. Aria almost smiled. Hours ago, those words might have shattered her. Now they meant nothing. She looked back at Celine. You fought so hard for him? Celine stared up at her. Aria's lips curved into a cold, beautiful smile. So keep the trash. She turned away. A strangled sound came from Caleb. Aria did not look back. Kaelen stepped beside her. No command passed between them. None was needed. They walked toward the ruined entrance at the same moment. His dark coat was returned to his shoulders as he moved. Her silver train flowed across the black dust left by the destroyed doors. Shadow and moonlight. Tyrant and queen. Their steps fell in perfect synchronization. Behind them, Caleb called her name again. Aria continued walking. Celine sobbed over the shattered badge. The elders remained crushed beneath the weight of what they had awakened, and under the blinding silver moon, Aria left Crescent Moon Keep without chains, without tears, and without once turning back. And under the blinding silver moon, Aria left Crescent Moon Keep without chains, without tears, and without once turning back. 3 weeks later, Crescent Valley began to die. At first, the pack blamed the weather. The streams narrowed despite the season's heavy rains. Water that had run clear for generations turned cloudy and bitter. Fish floated dead beneath the bridges. Wells produced only mud. Then the crops failed. Green stalks withered overnight, their leaves curling into blackened fists. Fruit rotted before it ripened. Roots shriveled beneath the soil as if the earth itself had withdrawn its favor. The livestock followed. Cattle refused food. Horses collapsed in their stalls. Newborn pups arrived weak and feverish, their wolves silent inside them. Pack healers worked until their hands shook. Nothing helped. Medicine spoiled. Healing magic failed. Silver fever spread through the servant quarter, then crossed into the warriors' barracks and the noble houses. Even strong wolves woke sweating, their joints burning, their senses dulled. Crescent Valley, once praised as the richest territory beneath the blood moon, became a land of empty markets and locked doors. The visiting packs stopped sending caravans. Merchants demanded payment in advance. Neighboring alphas withdrew their treaties. No one wished to trade with cursed soil. Within days, the pack treasury began to empty. Within 2 weeks, the servants had stopped receiving wages. By the third, hungry wolves gathered outside the keep and shouted Caleb's name with hatred. He heard them from the council chamber. "False alpha! Give us food! You drove away the blessing!" Caleb stood over a long stone table covered in reports. Failed harvests. Deaths. Desertions. Debts. Every page carried another collapse. He crushed one in his fist. "This is sabotage." No elder answered. Elder Morvain sat hunched at the far end of the chamber, his face gray and deeply lined. The night of Aria's awakening had aged him. He rarely slept now. When he did, he dreamed of silver eyes and the sound of a golden badge breaking beneath a heel. Caleb slammed both hands onto the table. "I said this is sabotage!" Morvain swallowed. "The border scouts have found no enemy movements. Then find better scouts. The soil itself is dying." Caleb turned on him. "Dirt does not choose sides." The elder looked down at the reports. "This land may." Caleb's face hardened. No one had dared say it so plainly. They had discussed old prophecies in whispers. Ancient blessings attached to royal bloodlines. Territories that flourished in the presence of true lunar queens. Before Aria left, Crescent Valley's forests had been thick with game. Its rivers had never frozen completely. Its fields produced more grain than the surrounding packs combined. They had called it fortune. Good leadership. Strong blood. Now the truth stood in the empty granaries. Aria had been the source. Not Caleb. Not the elders. Not the Crescent Moon bloodline. The wolfless servant they mocked had fed them all simply by existing on their land. Caleb threw the report away. "Where is Celine?" Morvain's expression tightened. "In her rooms." "Still?" "She refuses to come out." Caleb laughed without humor. Celine had worn her future Luna badge for less than an hour. Now she hid behind locked doors while servants stripped furniture from the keep to pay creditors. The stolen silver gown had been ruined. Blood stained its bodice. Dirt darkened the hem. Celine had demanded that a seamstress repair it, but the woman had packed her family and fled the valley that same night. Caleb had not shared Celine's bed since the ceremony. Every time he looked at her, he saw Aria's cold smile. "So keep the trash." The words followed him everywhere. In the council chamber. In his dreams. In the silent moments before dawn when the broken mate bond acted like an exposed nerve. He still felt Aria. Faintly. Not through a true bond. He had destroyed that. But his wolf remembered her. It paced inside him, restless and furious, rejecting food, rejecting sleep, rejecting Celine's scent with such violence that Caleb had once vomited when she touched him. He hated Aria for that. He hated her power, her transformation, the way the supreme Lycan King had knelt before her. Most of all, Caleb hated that he could not stop wanting her back. A sudden crash sounded beyond the chamber. The doors opened. A guard entered with blood running from his temple. The lower district has broken into the grain stores. There is no grain in the stores. They did not believe us. Another roar rose from outside. Closer this time. The keep windows rattled. Caleb looked toward the darkening valley. Smoke climbed from the market district. His pack was turning against him. His ascension had never been completed. The silver moon had interrupted the final ritual. He possessed the title of heir, but not the full spiritual authority of Alpha. The wolves felt it. Weakness. Failure. A false ruler sitting in a dying house. Caleb's hands curled. There is one solution. Morvain slowly raised his head. Caleb looked at him. I will bring her back. The elder's eyes widened. Aria? Queen Aria, Caleb corrected bitterly. You believe she will return here? She was my mate. You rejected her. I made a mistake. Morvain stared at him. Caleb heard the word before the elder spoke it. A mistake. As though public humiliation were an error in arithmetic. As though attempted enslavement were a poorly worded speech. As though iron had not nearly burned Aria's neck. Caleb straightened his coat. I will remind her of what existed between us before Celine and the council interfered. Morvain flinched. The council did not force your hand. Caleb's gaze sharpened. You advised me that a wolfless Luna would weaken the pack. I did. You said Celine was the safer choice. I did. Then you share the blame. Morvain bowed his head. Blame will not open the gates of Obsidian Keep. The name silenced the room. Obsidian Keep stood beyond the northern mountains, deep within the sovereign territory of the supreme Lycan King. No crescent wolf had entered it in living memory. Stories described walls carved from volcanic glass, towers that disappeared into storm clouds, dungeons beneath the mountains where traitorous alphas screamed for centuries without dying. Caleb felt fear stir beneath his ribs. He crushed it. Aria had once loved him. That had to matter. Childhood mattered. Fate mattered. He would make her remember. He abandoned Crescent Valley before sunset. He did not say goodbye to Celine. When she learned he was leaving, she ran into the courtyard barefoot, her hair loose and her face pale. You cannot go to her. Caleb mounted his horse. Behind him, 2 guards secured his traveling cloak. Celine grabbed the reins. She humiliated us. Caleb looked down at her. She is the White Wolf Queen. She is my sister. She is the reason this territory ever prospered. Celine's lips trembled. You said she was defective. I was wrong. The admission seemed to strike her. Celine tightened her grip. What about me? Caleb looked at the woman he had chosen. Without Aria to envy, Celine seemed smaller. Her beauty remained, but the sweetness had spoiled. He saw the calculation beneath every expression now. The need to possess whatever another person valued. You wanted the title, he said. There is no title left. He pulled the reins free. Celine stumbled backward. Caleb. He rode through the gates without turning. The journey north took 8 days. By the 3rd, Caleb's horse had gone lame. By the 5th, both guards deserted him. They vanished during the night with the remaining food, unwilling to cross into Lycan territory. Caleb continued alone. He walked through forests where no birds sang, crossed frozen rivers beneath dark skies, slept beneath trees with his ceremonial coat wrapped around him. He had once imagined arriving at Obsidian Keep with a diplomatic procession. Banners. Gifts. Warriors wearing crescent armor. Instead, he reached the Lycan capital on bleeding feet. The fortress rose from the mountain like the skeleton of a dead god. Obsidian walls cut into the clouds. Black towers pierced the storm. Great winged beasts circled the highest battlements, their cries rolling across the valley below. The main stairway climbed from the frozen road to gates carved with silver wolves. Hundreds of steps, each one black as polished night. Caleb stood at the bottom and stared upward. The pressure of Kaelen's territory weighed on him immediately. His wolf whined. Turn back. Caleb placed one foot on the first step. By the 20th, his legs trembled. By the 50th, sweat froze against his skin. The higher he climbed, the heavier the air became. Ancient magic pressed against his shoulders, testing his blood, his purpose, his worth. It found all three lacking. Caleb fell to one knee. He forced himself upright. At the 100th step, his nose began to bleed. At the 150th, he could no longer stand. He crawled. His palms scraped across the obsidian. Skin tore. Blood marked every step behind him. The guards at the summit watched without expression. They wore black armor bearing the silver crest of the Lycan throne. Neither moved to assist him. Caleb dragged himself higher. Please, his voice broke in the wind, no response. I need to see Queen Aria. The guards remained still. I was her mate. One guard's mouth tightened in disgust. Caleb reached the final steps and collapsed face first. His hands clutched the edge of the stone. Please let me speak to her. The great gates remained closed. Caleb raised his head. Tears filled his eyes. Not dignified tears. Not silent regret. Desperate, choking sobs. My pack is dying. The guards looked down at him. Our children are sick. The fields are dead. I know she can stop it. And that is why you came? One guard asked. Caleb froze. The guard's voice was calm. You did not crawl here because you understood what you did to her. You crawled here because your cupboards are empty. Caleb shook his head violently. No, I love her. The second guard laughed once. It held no amusement. You tried to brand her. I was pressured. You held the iron. The elders manipulated me. You gave the order. Caleb pressed his forehead to the step. I made a mistake. The gates opened. Caleb gasped. Two more guards emerged. For one brief, foolish instant, hope surged through him. Then they seized him beneath the arms. They did not allow him to walk. They dragged him. His boots scraped over the black floor. Blood from his hands smeared behind him as they hauled him through immense corridors lined with silver flame. Servants and warriors stopped to watch. No one bowed to him. No one recognized him as an heir. Here, Caleb was nothing. The guards dragged him through a final pair of doors. The throne room opened before him. It was vast enough to contain the entire Moonstone Hall twice over. Black columns rose into darkness. Silver fire burned in suspended braziers. Behind the twin thrones, an enormous window overlooked snow-covered mountains beneath an eternal twilight. Kaelen sat on the greater throne. He wore black from throat to boot, one arm resting on the carved head of a stone wolf. His posture appeared relaxed. It was not. Power radiated from him in silent layers. Beside him sat Aria. Caleb forgot how to breathe. She wore a gown of deep silver that clung elegantly to her body before spilling over the throne steps in a glittering train. The neckline revealed the graceful curve of her shoulders. Fine chains of moonstone rested against her pale skin. Her silver-white hair fell in luminous waves down her back, and a narrow crown of black metal and ice-blue gems circled her head. She looked divine, beautiful enough to hurt, cold enough to terrify. Her ice-blue eyes settled on Caleb. Nothing moved in her face, no shock, no anger, no remembered affection. She looked at him as one might look at an insect crawling across a clean floor. The guards threw Caleb down. His knees struck the stone. He crawled forward. Aria! Kaelen's fingers tightened against the throne. The carved wolf head cracked beneath his hand. Aria did not react. Caleb sobbed. I came to bring you home. Silence answered him. He looked up at her. Crescent Valley is dying. I know. Her voice was calm. You know? I can feel the land. Then you know the children are sick. You know the wells are poisoned. Yes. Caleb crawled closer. The guards reached for him, but Kaelen lifted one finger. They stopped. Caleb mistook the permission for hope. You can save them. Aria's gaze remained empty. You mean I can save you? No. The lie came too quickly. Caleb shook his head. I mean the pack. Our pack. It was never mine. You were born there. I was imprisoned there. We grew up together. Aria did not blink. Caleb's voice cracked with emotion. Do you remember the river? The winter I gave you my coat? Do you remember the pine grove when we discovered the mate bond? Aria remembered. That was the worst part. She remembered the boy Caleb had been, or the boy she had believed him to be. She remembered his promises, his warmth, his hand around hers. Those memories no longer softened the man kneeling before her. They condemned him. He had known her heart, known how deeply she trusted him. And he had used that knowledge to make the rejection hurt more. Caleb pressed both hands to the floor. I was under pressure. My father was dead. The elders told me the pack would never accept a wolfless Luna. Celine filled my head with lies. Aria's eyes narrowed slightly. Caleb saw movement and became frantic. She poisoned you. She manipulated me. I was grieving. I was afraid. I thought I had to choose the pack. You chose yourself. He stopped. Aria leaned back against her throne. You wanted their applause. Aria, you wanted a Luna they would envy. You wanted a ceremony that made you look powerful. When I threatened that image, you tried to reduce me to property. Caleb wept harder. I am sorry. She looked unmoved. I will spend my life proving it. No, I can reject Celine. I do not care. I can restore your place. A faint, almost disbelieving smile touched Aria's mouth. My place? Caleb heard the stupidity of the words too late. Aria looked around the throne room, at the silver flames, the kneeling guards, the mountains beneath her feet. Then she looked back at him. You believe you can restore me? Caleb lowered his face. I am begging for a second chance. No, she said. You are begging for the consequences to stop. Kaelen's rage boiled beside her. It had been building since Caleb entered. Each mention of their childhood fed it. Each plea for a restored mate bond sharpened it. The tyrant's dark eyes had become entirely black. Still, he did not rise. He did not need to. Caleb reached one trembling hand toward Aria. Please. Kaelen flicked his wrist. Caleb screamed. His body lifted from the floor. Invisible force locked around his chest and limbs, spreading him in the air as though chained to a rack. Silver light ignited beneath his skin. No, Caleb thrashed. Veins bulged along his neck. Something inside his blood began moving against its natural flow. It gathered at his heart. His alpha inheritance. The concentrated power passed through generations of crescent rulers. The strength that sharpened his senses. The blood authority that allowed him to command weaker wolves. Kaelen closed his fingers. Caleb's chest arched. The alpha blood tore free. It emerged through his pores in glowing crimson strands. Not ordinary blood. Power made visible. It ripped from his arms, throat, and heart in twisting ribbons. Every strand carried fragments of his rank. His wolf howled inside him. The sound became a human scream. Caleb's eyes flashed gold, then dimmed. No, please, not my blood. Kaelen watched without expression. You used rank to justify cruelty. Another flick of his fingers. More power ripped free. Caleb convulsed. His muscles weakened before the court's eyes. The commanding scent of an alpha vanished from his body. His wolf shrank, stripped of the inherited strength it had never deserved. The glowing blood gathered above him in a pulsing sphere. Kaelen made a fist. It collapsed into ash. Caleb fell. He hit the floor with the frail weight of an ordinary man. For several seconds, he could only gasp. Then he reached inward for his wolf. Nothing answered. His eyes widened. No. Kaelen's voice crossed the throne room. You are no alpha. Caleb clutched his chest. No. You are no heir. He tried to rise. His legs failed. You possess no pack claim, no blood authority, and no right to command a single wolf. Caleb crawled toward the throne. Aria, stop him! Aria looked down at him. The insect had begun to scream. She felt nothing. Kaelen leaned back. Caleb Thorne, you are declared rogue. The word struck like a final blade. Caleb began shaking. A rogue possessed no territory, no pack protection, no legal standing, no place at any communal fire. The guards seized him. He fought weakly. Aria! They dragged him toward the doors. Please, I love you. She did not move. I was your mate. The doors opened. Cold wind rushed into the throne room. Caleb screamed her name again as the guards hauled him into the corridor. His voice diminished, then vanished. The doors closed. Silence returned. No crowd remained. No elders. No former mate. Only 2 thrones beneath silver fire. Aria sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Kaelen turned toward her. His possessive fury slowly receded, leaving the vast throne room quiet beneath the absolute power of its king and queen. His possessive fury slowly receded, leaving the vast throne room quiet beneath the absolute power of its king and queen. Aria remained on her throne long after Caleb's screams had disappeared. She had imagined that moment many times during the years when she believed she was powerless. Not the throne, not the crown, revenge. She had imagined Caleb realizing what he had lost. She had imagined Selene begging. She had imagined the elders choking on the same fear they had forced her to swallow. She had believed justice would feel like fire. Instead, it felt like silence. Clean. Final. The past had reached for her one last time, and she had watched it dragged away without allowing it to close its fingers around her ankle. Kaelen studied her face. Do you regret it? Aria turned toward him. His punishment? Not saving him. She looked toward the closed doors. No. The answer came without hesitation. Kaelen's dark gaze held hers. The valley may survive, she continued. The innocent people there are not responsible for Caleb's cruelty. I have already ordered healers and grain sent to the lower districts. I know, but I will not restore the old blessing. A faint approval entered his expression. They will rebuild without feeding on your power. Yes. And they will remember why they were forced to. Aria leaned back. Also, yes. Kaelen reached across the space between their thrones and took her hand. The gesture was simple, yet it carried more weight than Caleb's entire performance. Kaelen never touched her as though she belonged to him. He touched her as though he had chosen her, as though he would continue choosing her each day. The difference had changed everything. Weeks passed. Crescent Valley did not recover quickly, but it stopped dying. Lycan healers treated the sick. Supply caravans crossed the northern roads. The Pack Council was dissolved, and the remaining elders were forced to surrender their estates to fund reconstruction. Selene vanished before the first relief convoy arrived. Some said she fled into the border forests. Others claimed she joined a traveling pack under a false name. Aria never asked. Selene had spent her entire life forcing herself into the center of Aria's story. Now Aria denied her even the dignity of being remembered. Caleb's fate spread through the territories. The rejected queen had risen. The false heir had fallen. Within days, songs appeared in the northern taverns. Some were crude, others exaggerated. All ended with the same image, an arrogant alpha crawling from a throne room without his wolf. Aria refused to listen to them. Her life had become larger than his punishment. The coronation was set for the first night of the winter convergence, when the silver moon would pass directly over the highest tower of Obsidian Keep. It would also be the night of the royal wedding. The capital prepared for 10 days. Black and gold banners were suspended from every tower. Silver flames lined the mountain roads. Delegations arrived from territories Aria had only seen on maps. Alphas, Lunas, Lycan generals, white-haired seers from the frozen southern plains, wolf kings from distant kingdoms beyond the storm sea. They did not come to witness a servant elevated by marriage. They came to kneel before a queen whose blood had awakened the moon. On the morning of the ceremony, Aria stood before a wall of dark glass, while royal attendants fastened the final clasps of her gown. For several moments, She did not recognize the woman reflected there. Not because she had forgotten her own face, because she had finally learned to see it, without the distortions of cruelty. The gown was black, not the faded gray of servant cloth, not the desperate silver Celine had worn at Caleb's altar, black like the obsidian mountains surrounding the capital. It fitted Aria's body with breathtaking precision, sculpted across her waist and hips, before flowing into a long, dramatic train. Gold embroidery climbed from the hem in the shapes of wolves, thorns, and rising flames. The fitted bodice framed her shoulders and traced the elegant lines of her figure with regal confidence. A narrow opening along one side revealed the graceful movement of her leg as she walked. The gown did not conceal her beauty. It declared it. Her silver-white hair fell down her back in luminous waves. Fine gold chains had been woven through several strands, each ending in a tiny black gemstone. Her eyes glowed ice blue beneath long, dark lashes. No circlet rested on her head. Not yet. A young attendant stood behind her with tears in her eyes. Aria noticed. "Is something wrong?" The woman immediately lowered her face. "No, Your Majesty! You are crying." The attendant swallowed. "My mother was born in Crescent Valley." Aria remained still. "She worked in the lower kitchens," the woman continued. "She knew you when you were a child." Aria turned fully toward her. "What was her name?" "Mara." A memory returned. A warm piece of bread hidden beneath a folded towel. A woman with tired brown eyes pretending not to notice when Aria stole leftovers after midnight. "She was kind to me," Aria said. The attendant's tears fell. "She always said you were stronger than everyone believed." Aria looked back at the mirror. The woman in the black and gold gown no longer seemed unfamiliar. She was right. The throne room doors opened. Kaelen entered alone. Every attendant bowed. He wore formal black armor beneath a long royal coat embroidered with gold. The armor shaped itself around his towering, heavily muscular body, fitting over his broad chest and powerful shoulders like a second skin. A black sword hung at his side. His dark hair had been swept back from his face. He looked exactly as the stories described him. A tyrant, a conqueror. The last ruler enemies saw before their kingdoms disappeared. Then his eyes found Aria. The ruthless expression vanished. He stopped in the doorway. For once, the supreme Lycan King had no words. Aria's lips curved. "Is the gown acceptable?" Kaelen crossed the room. The attendants quietly withdrew. He stopped before her and looked down at her with naked intensity. "Acceptable?" His voice was rough. Aria lifted one eyebrow. That sounded dangerously close to criticism. Kaelen's hand settled at her waist. "The gown is fortunate I have permitted it to remain on you." Heat moved through Aria despite the cold silver light. "You are expected at a coronation." "I am aware. And a wedding. I have waited longer for this wedding than these mountains have stood." His thumb traced one gold thread along her waist. Aria studied him. "You still have not answered my question." Kaelen bent until his mouth hovered near hers. "You look like every war I would willingly lose." The words struck deeper than flattery. Aria placed one hand against the hard plane of his chest. "And you look as though you intend to frighten the guests." "I intend to frighten anyone who looks at you too long." She almost laughed. "Possessive tyrant. You're possessive tyrant." Kaelen kissed her, not with the restrained reverence he had shown when he first knelt before her. This kiss was deep, claiming, yet never coercive. His massive hand tightened at her waist, while the other rose to cradle the back of her head. Aria leaned into him, allowing herself to feel the strength surrounding her without mistaking it for a cage. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "Are you ready?" Aria thought of the dirt floor beneath the blood moon, the iron collar, Caleb's laughter, the servant dress torn across her shoulder. Then she looked into the eyes of the king who had bowed before her, before asking her for anything. "Yes!" They entered the great ceremonial hall together. Thousands of voices fell silent. The hall had been transformed. Black pillars were wrapped in gold branches. Silver flames burned high above the gathered rulers. An aisle of polished obsidian led toward an elevated platform beneath the open roof. The winter moon hung directly above it. Silver. Brilliant. Watching. Aria walked beside Kaelen. Not behind him, not guided by his hand, beside him. Their steps struck the obsidian in perfect unison, just as they had when leaving Crescent Moon Keep. The difference was that no blood stained her feet now. No chains waited at the end of the aisle. The representatives of every territory bowed as she passed. Some lowered their heads, others dropped to one knee. The most ancient Lycans pressed closed fists over their hearts, acknowledging her bloodline in the old royal manner. Aria did not shrink beneath their attention. She met it, accepted it, owned it. At the base of the platform stood the High Oracle, an ageless woman with white eyes and a cloak woven from black feathers. Kaelen and Aria faced one another. The Oracle raised a ceremonial blade. "Power without loyalty becomes tyranny," she said. Her voice reached every corner of the hall. "Loyalty without freedom becomes servitude. A true bond is neither conquest nor surrender. It is the joining of equals who choose one another without fear." Kaelen held out his hand. Aria placed hers within it. The Oracle drew the blade across Kaelen's palm. Dark Lycan blood emerged. Then, she cut Aria's hand. Silver light shone in her blood. Their palms pressed together. The instant their blood touched, the hall shook. Shadows surged from Kaelen. Moonlight burst from Aria. The two powers spiraled upward, crossing above them in a vast crown of silver and black. Every wolf in the capital howled. Aria felt the bond form. Not the painful thread she had once shared with Caleb. This was deeper, wider, voluntary. It did not drag her toward Kaelen. It opened a door and waited for her to step through. Aria stepped. Kaelen's emotions reached her. Ancient loneliness. Centuries of violence. A life spent surrounded by obedience but starved of trust. Then something fierce enough to eclipse all of it. Love. Not gentle love. Not fragile love. A vast, disciplined devotion that had chosen her before knowing whether she would choose him. Aria opened herself in return. Kaelen saw the servant quarters, the cold floors, the poisoned meals, the years she had endured by hiding every wound behind silence. He saw the moment Caleb rejected her, felt the bond tear, felt the boot between her shoulder blades. A growl rolled through his chest. Aria tightened her hand around his. "I survived." The thought moved through their bond. Kaelen's fury softened. "You conquered." The Oracle lowered the blade. "The bond is witnessed." The crowd bowed. Kaelen lifted Aria's wounded palm and kissed it. The cut closed beneath his lips. Then he turned with her toward the black pedestal at the center of the platform. The obsidian crown waited there. It was heavier than any circlet Aria had ever seen. 8 dark points rose from its base, each lined with veins of molten gold. At the center rested a single white moonstone shaped like a wolf's eye. Kaelen lifted it with both hands. The hall went utterly silent. Aria lowered her head. Only slightly, not in submission, to receive what had always been hers. Kaelen placed the crown upon her silver hair. The weight settled over her. It was immense. Not merely metal. Responsibility. Judgment. Protection. The lives of millions now existed within the reach of her decisions. For a fleeting moment, Aria thought of the Alpha badge beneath her heel. How desperately Celine had wanted that little piece of gold. How desperately Caleb had wanted others to validate his strength. They had fought over symbols, because neither understood what power truly cost. Aria did. A crown was not proof that she stood above others. It was a promise that she would not allow those beneath its protection to be crushed as she had been. The moonstone at the crown's center ignited. Silver light swept through the hall. The High Oracle lowered herself to both knees. "Rise, White Wolf Queen!" Aria lifted her head. Kaelen looked at her. Pride blazed in his dark eyes. Not ownership, recognition. The Oracle joined their hands once more. "Before blood, moon, and kingdom, do you choose each other?" Kaelen answered first. Across every life. Aria felt the truth of it through the bond. She looked at the man who had destroyed armies but had waited for permission to touch her face. The king who had offered power without demanding obedience. The tyrant who knelt only once, for her. I choose you freely, she said. Kaelen's jaw tightened with emotion. The oracle stepped back. Their first kiss as king and queen began gently, a touch of lips beneath the silver moon. Then Kaelen's restraint broke. His arm locked around Aria's waist and pulled her flush against his broad chest. The crowd erupted as she reached up, caught the front of his royal coat, and kissed him with equal hunger. Silver light burst from the crown. Dark power rolled across the ceiling. The entire capital shook with the force of their bond. When the kiss ended, Aria was breathless. Kaelen looked ready to carry her from the hall and end the ceremony immediately. She smiled against his mouth. There are still several thousand people watching. They can leave. You are their king, and you are their queen. Command them to leave. Aria laughed. The sound startled several ancient nobles. Kaelen's expression softened. He had heard her laugh before, but never like this. Without restraint, without fear that joy might be used against her. The great balcony doors opened. Cold mountain air swept into the hall. Kaelen offered Aria his hand. Together they walked outside. The sight beyond the balcony stole her breath. The Lycan capital stretched across the mountains below. Black towers rose beneath the silver moon. Golden fires burned along every street and bridge. Banners moved in the winter wind, carrying the white wolf crest beside the black insignia of Kaelen's empire. And everywhere there were wolves. Tens of thousands filled the courtyards, rooftops, mountain roads, and lower terraces. Warriors in dark armor. Families holding their children. Delegations from distant packs. White wolves from forgotten bloodlines who had traveled for weeks to witness the return of their queen. The moment Aria appeared, the entire capital dropped to its knees. The movement traveled across the city like a wave. One district, then another. Then the mountain roads beyond. Heads bowed, fists struck hearts. The silence lasted for a single sacred breath. Then the howling began. It rose from tens of thousands of throats. Not fear, not forced obedience. Devotion. The sound shook snow from the mountain peaks. It rolled across the capital and into the distant forests. Wild wolves answered from beyond the walls. The great winged beasts circling the towers released thunderous cries. Aria stood beneath the silver moon and felt every voice. Her aura spread over the city. The wolves below bowed lower, not because she crushed them, but because they recognized her, their queen. The white wolf returned. Kaelen moved behind her, his massive arms wrapped around her waist. He pulled her back against the broad, armored strength of his chest. The position could have looked possessive. It felt protective. His mouth lowered beside her ear. The entire world is at your feet. His voice was fierce enough to cut through the howls. Aria looked over the kneeling capital. Once, she had believed that being chosen by Caleb would prove she possessed value. She had believed becoming his Luna would silence every insult, that his love would transform suffering into meaning. But worth granted by another person could always be withdrawn. That was not power. It was dependence, dressed as destiny. Caleb had rejected her because he was blind. The crowd had mocked her because they trusted his blindness more than their own eyes. Celine had hated her because stolen approval was the only form of confidence she understood. Aria had spent years waiting for people like them to recognize what stood before them. In the end, their recognition had not mattered. Her power had not been created by Kaelen's arrival. He had not made her a queen. He had only seen the crown while it was still buried beneath ash. True power was not found in seeking validation from those who were blind to your worth. It was born the moment you stopped begging to be seen. The moment you rose from the dirt, gathered every broken piece of yourself, and understood that survival had not made you lesser. It had forged you. The rejection had not destroyed Aria. It had separated her from the life too small to contain her. The humiliation had not become her identity. It had become the fire beneath her awakening. The rags, the wounds, the years of silence, none of them had been proof of weakness. They were evidence that even buried, poisoned, and chained, something royal inside her had refused to die. Aria placed one hand over Kaelen's arm. His grip tightened. "What do you see?" he asked. She watched the capital kneeling below. "A beginning." Kaelen kissed the side of her crown. "Then, tell me what you desire." Aria turned within his arms. The howling continued beneath them. She rested her palms against his chest and met the darkness in his eyes without fear. "A kingdom where no one is punished for being powerless." Kaelen inclined his head. "It will be done. A law forbidding forced bonds and slave contracts. Done. Independent councils to protect servants, rejected mates, and wolfless citizens. Done." Aria's lips curved. "You agree very easily for a tyrant." Kaelen bent closer. "You have not asked for anything I did not already intend to give you." "And what do you intend to give me?" His dark gaze moved over her face. "Everything." Below them, another wave of howls rose. Aria turned back toward the city. She lifted one hand. Silence swept across the capital. The wolves waited. Her voice carried with the strength of the bond, reaching every street and distant road. "Rise." Tens of thousands obeyed. Not as servants, as her people. Aria looked over them with the obsidian crown resting firmly upon her head. No longer the girl kicked into the dirt. No longer the rejected mate. No longer the wolfless servant forced to survive on scraps of mercy. She was Aria, the last White Wolf Queen. Beside her stood a king powerful enough to conquer the world and wise enough not to conquer her. Behind them waited two thrones. Before them stretched an empire, and far beyond the mountains, beneath the same silver moon that had witnessed her humiliation, every pack would soon learn the truth. A crown did not become sacred because others bowed before it. It became sacred because of the woman who had possessed the courage to rise and wear it. True power is not found in begging others to recognize your worth. It begins when you stop accepting their judgment, rise beyond what tried to break you, and embrace the crown that was always yours. If you enjoyed this unexpected journey and want to experience more thrilling mysteries and fierce romances, please subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you for listening.